to do. Now's the time. Do it.
Whether acknowledged or not, you find yourself engaged in a relentless spiritual war. Irrespective of your awareness, an unseen adversary seeks to destroy you, not only in this life, but also in the next. Regardless of your location on this planet, you reside in a fiercely contested battlefield, and escaping this conflict feels impossible. Welcome to Truth and Shadow, your guide through the supernatural. I am your host, BT, and this is a Shadow Short. Let's navigate the unknown on this brief journey into the depths of mystery. Good morning, listeners. Today I've got Brandon Spain and Lindsay Waters from Unrefined Podcast, because this Shadow Short brought to you is a collaboration that I've done over on their podcast, and I wanted to bring a snippet of that over here onto my podcast so that y'all can listen to it and hear. And if you want to hear the rest of the episode, links in the show notes. Hey, Brandon, what's going on with you?
Not much, bro. Glad to be here.
And Lindsay, how are you doing?
Doing well. Hello, Truth and Shadow listeners.
And you've guys got a great vision over at unrefinedpodcast.com. Can you speak on that for a brief moment?
Yeah, absolutely. Our vision started with Lindsay and I. We would have really good conversations on the telephone. And I said, I would love to record this. There might be other people out there that would like to listen to it. So I said, Sandy, is there an app we can just record? She's like, nope, there's not an app. There's something you can do. And I'm like, what? She's like, you can podcast. So it started with that. And the vision has just exploded, and our main vision is just to glorify Christ in dealing with supernatural, fringy topics, but also conspiratorial and other things like that. We ultimately want to point back to Jesus, and everything from there is just gravy.
Along the same lines, I want this podcast to be an equipping tool, whatever that means. Yeah, other people starting podcasts, but man, it could be inspiring them to write a book about some of these subjects. But I guess at the end of the day, how does all this make us better disciples of Christ?
Absolutely.
That's where I would, where's the rubber meets the road of this? And
well said.
I think we've done a good job of that. We've had people on to talk about not necessarily fringe things, just missionary.
Yeah, this time you guys have, how many episodes are you at now?
I have no idea. Yeah.
We're in the mid-70s, I think.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I appreciate you guys just having a little chit chat with me before I start this episode for the rest of the audience. And we have a lot more collaborations coming on in the future on unrefinedpodcast.com. The link's in the show notes. You can find Brandon Spain and Lindsay Waters there.
Yeah, and check out we have a Facebook group called Unrefined Friends where we're developing community, which is really good. And BT, thank you for coming on our show and being a collaborative with us. We appreciate your knowledge, dropping the knowledge, brother.
You've got it, guys. Thank you.
Welcome, you guys, to another episode of Unrefined Podcast, and I have Lindsay here with us. Hey, Lindsay.
Hey, guys.
And we've also got a special co-host who's been in and out of our podcast and has his own podcast, Truth and Shadow Podcast. If you haven't checked it out, you need to. It's really awesome. I just listened to one of his shorts today, Shadow Shorts he's doing, on spiritual warfare, which is really interesting because that leads us into what we're going to talk about today. Hey, BT, how you doing?
Hey, you guys. Drinking my coffee this morning. I'm ready to roll.
Ready to roll. BT's been talking on his podcast a lot about spiritual warfare and
sinister forces. It seems to encompass everything from fallen angels to the demonic, which are the unclean spirits of the Nephilim.
That's a great terminology because it includes angels, but it doesn't limit it to like just the job description of angels. You know, that's one of the things that if I've learned anything over the past 3 or 4 years, I've learned that angels is not a descriptive name other than it's more of a vocational type name. So
yeah, angel is what they do. Spirit is what they are.
Yeah, exactly. So today we are going to tackle all kinds of interesting things, but just to put a name on it, we're going to talk mostly about the chaos and leviathan here today and dip into some cosmology and everything. What is leviathan?
Well, the thing is in the Second Temple period, Brandon, the people who lived post-Babylonian exile believed that these forces, these entities were real, that they were part of their furniture of belief. They were as common or as perceivable as the sacred bread in the tabernacle would have been to them. And that means that Leviathan wasn't its own entity. It came with Behemoth, which would be the beast of the ground, Leviathan being the beast of the ocean or the waters. And just like anybody who's ever had to fight back blackberry brambles knows quite well the chaos of the land. And anybody who lives near the waters and deals with flooding knows quite well the chaos of the water.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm both and as far as, I think it's some sort of real beast or entity, but also there's a just kind of a motif you see in various mythologies. The Germans had a term for it called Chaoskampf. That means struggle against chaos. You got your cultural hero or deity and some monster that represents chaos. And yeah, I think it's both and.
Beowulf versus Grendel.
Mm-hmm.
In my reading and studying about this, I tend to agree. I think with everything that's been said, I think it was real. And I'm still not sure that it's not even real, that we just don't know about it. I mean, you know, you got to realize, I don't know how much of the Earth's surface is water, but it's a huge portion of it, right? Three quarters of it, maybe? Is there that too?
It's huge. You can say that.
Yeah. And so we don't know, you know, we've never explored they're not like outer space per se, but we've never explored the depths of the oceans, and we have no idea. But I tend to come down where I think it's both a spiritual reality and a spiritual entity as well as a psychological reality and entity too. Chaos is like a principle, but also maybe a real being as well, like a real actual creature. And we know, like PT said, we know that the Leviathan was in the furniture of all different types of cultures all around the world that are not anywhere. There's no way they could have communicated that. So it's really fascinating. It's like the floods, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, we saw it a little bit when we went over the Quetzalcoatl with the hero twins, battling the Seven Macau and his sons.
Listen,
the Wonder Twins,
the Wonder Twins, Mayan Wonder Twins.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember that. Quetzalcoatl himself is a plumed serpent, which I want to get into later on when we talk more about cosmology and the void and formless and void. But it's interesting, I think, and I'll go ahead and throw this out there, that new paleontology research is tending to lean more that dinosaurs were not only reptilian but more bird-like, which I think is interesting. Combination of both of those animals.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Well, I mean, it's a real common thing, Brandon. People all over the place have these ideas, these stories, these horror stories of the waters and the oceans. You know, the Megalodon movies or the Shark Attack movies make a lot of money either when they come out or residual.
Yeah.
Which is pretty, so you have sailors talking about Kraken, you have Loch Ness monsters, you've got all sorts of ideas of a creature that lives in the waters that may be scary, may not be scary, like Kelpie.
Or what is the name of the one up there in Anatolia, the Armenian area?
We're talking about
Vishaps.
The Vishaps out of Lake Van. Yeah,
Lake Van. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that plays into the whole, and that combines the aquatic type aspect of Leviathan, in my opinion.
Yeah, that'd be the Armenians. The Armenians have a real long, rich history of these Vishap monsters. If they get too big, they'll consume the whole planet.
What is the symbolism of Leviathan? I mean, we know it's chaos, but let's go deeper than that. What can we dig out of that?
Well, I think the word means something like coiled in the Hebrew. So there's this idea of something that's kind of twisted, like I guess similar to the way a serpent does.
Yeah.
There's a handful of different. I'll talk about this for a minute. In modern theistic or even atheistic Satanism, there's a symbol. It's called the Leviathan cross. It's basically the infinity sign, so that'd be the number 8 on its side, plus a double cross, and they call that the Leviathan cross. And it's an interesting concept for them to call it that, because they're drawing upon the word Leviathan, which was carved at the base of the Baphomet statue designed by Eliphas Levi.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, interesting.
And his idea, right? And Eliphas Levi was a late 1800s occultist, and he believed that real Christianity, oddly enough, because that's what he came out of, was more of a chaotic struggle than something of order.
Yeah, I mean, we do see it. I mean, the primary meaning or symbol is chaos and disorder. And, God's mission, more so than just freeing us from sin, because, I mean, that's what sin is it's a disorder. It's a dis-ease, so to speak. Mm. It's a disorder of how we've not ordered our lives. So sin equals chaos. Yeah, I think that's one of the primary symbols. And you can take that and go from there and go all different directions and stuff. So biblically, let's explore biblically. There's a passage that I wanted to share, but I'll let you guys go first. But there's a passage that I wanted to share that really jumped out at me in my study and reading. I'll get to that. So what do you guys think biblically? What can we learn biblically about Leviathan?
Well, Leviathan pops up in the book of Job several times. I do believe that this is the primary location. It's God's talking to Job later on. Yeah. I do believe it's later chapter, 40, 41, somewhere around there. Mm-hmm. And God's like, can you draw Leviathan out of the ocean with a hook? Can you just take this and defeat it like you could drawing out a fish?
Yeah, fish analogy. That's what I was saying. Yep. So historically, I think this is important. We should have tackled this a second ago, but we can tackle it now. So historically, through the different nations, so to speak, what has historically Leviathan looked like? I know we talked about Mesoamerica and Quetzalcoatl, the plumed serpent, which we talked about before. What are some other, per nationality, what does Leviathan always kind of look like?
It's always a water serpent. It's always some kind of scaled serpentine entity, from Jormungandr of the Vikings to
often
Ouroboros.
Multi-headed, 7-headed.
All right, have you guys read comparison to a basilisk? Because I was reading through in the Hebrew world that there's a combination of Leviathan even being a form of a basilisk. In other words, having the ability to be able to through their eyes be able to turn people to stone and all that kind of stuff.
No, I wasn't aware of that connection.
So anybody who's probably familiar with the Harry Potter series would come across the story where the hero, Potter in this case, is battling against the basilisk with a special sword given to him by a phoenix. What some may not know is the basilisk is also defined or described as a rooster. So you have a chicken,
a bird
that's a basilisk, or something that's a serpent.
Another plumed reptile, sort of, huh?
Right. I mean, if you talk like Pliny the Elder is going to say a basilisk is a serpent that's small. It's no more than 12 inches in length, but it's but it is poisonous enough to paralyze a person.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the Bible uses the word basilisk a couple of times, and it probably means cobra instead of,
Yeah. The references I saw were more of like a seraphim type reference, that cobra with his outstretched hood that can favor wings, so to speak.
Well, absolutely.
Well, and an interesting thing too, realize what Jesus did with hell, death, and the grave. I mean, he conquered chaos. That's why the resurrection is so essential and important to the gospel, not just the cross. A lot of evangelicals in our circles will put all the emphasis on the cross. And I'm not taking away from the blood of Jesus or the cross of Christ. However, the resurrection is where Christ was victorious over the chaos. That's where he put his head, like in Genesis in the proto-evangelium, where he put his head on the serpent's head, finally, is through the resurrection.
The heel.
Yeah. And so I think we miss that because we have imbibed, and this is not Catholics' fault, you guys, but this is just Western Christianity's fault. We have imbibed a lot of Western ways of looking and Roman ways of looking, and Greek too, not just Roman, but Greek ways of looking at things. Whereas we need to have kind of a conflation between an Eastern way of looking at things and a Western way of looking at things. And I liken it to just a bag of golf clubs. There's all these different ways we can look at what we're talking about, and in some ways you need a one iron, or then you might need a one wood, you might need a chipper, you might need a putter, and so it's like the richness of the body of Christ is needed to be able to explain all these different beliefs, because a lot of them are all true at the same time. The ones that aren't mutually exclusive, so to speak. But yeah, I just that Hieronymus Bosch painting just really sticks out at me, and I'll have to look up what his famous painting was. But it's just eerie. It's just his style of painting, and he's the kind of painter that you can see him and instantly, once you've familiarized yourself with him, you familiarized yourself with what he looks like, what his paintings look like. But yeah, so when we're talking about hell, this leads us back to Leviathan and how Jesus overcame Leviathan through the resurrection, and how he has commissioned us to overcome Leviathan. And I think that that's a great way to make what we're talking about ultimately practical. And so what I'd like to throw out to you guys, if we could talk about this, we're talking about Leviathan. Now, what is this relationship with chaos magic? And we need to start with some basic definitions before we get up there. What is chaos magic, and what does it consist of, and how does it relate to Leviathan?
Sounds like you're aiming at me there. That's fine.
Well, either one.
Many of the listeners probably are aware that I have an occult background. That's kind of where I ended up before I was saved. And it's important to understand that chaos magic really, many people are going to argue where it came from or where its beginnings are, but it's popular.
It's everywhere. Like my son was telling me, it's in Witcher, and they actually took the real Crowley magic when the guy wrote Witcher, and then when they made the video game, and it's like actually occultically, correct when they did that. Anyway, I just thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, and your chaos magic's going to be Michael Ford. He's a real big author in these things. And he's going to pull on a handful of different ideas relating to the chaotic forces of nature. The main thing with the newer age style occult belief systems are, if one thing doesn't work for you, try something else. And I find that quite amusing because it's basically charlatanism.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I'm going to wax personal here for a minute, because when I was devoted to the dark forces that I believed were my gods, that the rituals that I had performed that once basically filled me with this sense of power, it's what I felt, began to, it was a twisted sense of power, but it began to leave me unsettled. Like I couldn't do enough in the ritual to reach the same level of high. And the main goal with that kind of magic, chaotic as it was seeking forbidden knowledge. If I had knowledge that no one else knew, I would have power over them, etc. And instead of it being a blessing, was this big burden. But Brandon, it was during these moments of introspection when I started thinking about it, and I had a yearning for something brighter, purer, and more redemptive. The rituals that I used to define who I was became hollow. They no longer felt the same grip on my heart. And basically, this was that catalyst. This is this transformative catalyst that I speak about, where I began to pray to God again. And in those quiet moments when I had realized that this was hollow, that the sinister forces were losing their grip on my heart, that I found solace in the teachings of Christ. So the stark contrast between darkness that I knew and the light offered by faith became irresistible.
Yeah. So while I've still got this on my mind, can I jump in and ask you this?
Go ahead.
First of all, man, just thanks for making this just really personal, man. This wasn't just fun and games to you when we're talking about chaos magic. This was something you dealt with.
Yeah, I once immersed myself in the shadows of this.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But okay, so you talk about the lure of chaos magic, but when you said that, it made me think, what about being aware of the kind of false order that the enemy can offer as an alternative to that? I just wondered if you could speak to that.
Lindsay. Yeah. Well, what the point is any of the sinister forces who seek to manipulate and gain your worship, they're ultimately doing it because they get clout in hell. That's the whole purpose. They gain more authority and power in hell. They gain levels. If you want to talk about concurrent video game terminology, they gain levels and they gain skill sets because they're manipulative.
Degrees like masonry,
Yep.
Yeah. And the scriptures commonly says, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that Yahweh God, his ways are so far above our ways. The same is true about the sinister forces. These entities have been around for so long, they know things before you would ever even think to know them. Which means they know how to manipulate. We're talking about entities that have been around so long, and they understand the human brain. If you were to think of the human brain like a computer, it's not. But if you were to think of the human brain like a computer, these guys can hack that, make you see things that are not there, tell you things that aren't coming from your own mind, and make you feel things that don't have any place of origin. This is chaos. These are things that we cannot begin to comprehend. And anybody who is a chaos magician, anybody who practices magic, sorcery, or anything relating to the occult, in its essence, are tapping into things that are so beyond human comprehension that they look like gods. That's why they were once worshipped by people, because they looked like gods. Thank you for listening. This is a free podcast based upon the value for value model. If you find value in this, or any episode, you can return that value by liking the show, subscribing to this channel, leaving a review, or sharing with a friend on your social media accounts. You can also donate on my website. Thank you again. This is BT for Truth and Shadow Podcast. You are the light in the darkness.